Welcome, everybody. We have over 100 people on the line in this new way of doing business that we're all getting used to. This is, of course, a new situation for all of us, and we are learning as we go. So we will all need to be a little patient with glitches in the communication as we all get more used to operate remotely. But it's important that we get together, and it's important that we share. It's important that we talk to one another. It's important that we support each other, and that we, in the funders community, have an intelligent response and an empathetic response to the problem of the community. We are in a situation of influence and power, and now's the time where we have to use it in the wisest possible way. As we all know, the coronavirus is a public health crisis, but it's also creating economic and logistic challenges for institutions, for Jewish institutions, for secular institutions, and for individuals, folks living on hourly wages, people working freelance and the like. So we are only now starting to see the long-term effects of the crisis. Crises have long tails, and this one's going to have a very long tail. And we're just, as a community, we're waiting to see where the chips are going to fall in terms of what the crises that are going to need our attention are going to be in the next weeks and months. We at JFN, we are going to keep this conversation going, keep offering funders and communal leaders updates on what the community is doing and how the community is responding. And this conversation we're having now is the first of a series. We're going to have another virtual meetup next week in the days of our conference that unfortunately was postponed. That seemed like a century ago, and it was just a week ago, but things move very fast. But we're keeping those dates, and we're going to continue this conversation. And then on March 30th, the following week, we're going to have yet another conversation on communal responses to coronavirus. In this particular webinar, we're going to be exploring 4 different responses to the crisis. 2 from the United States, 1 from Israel, and 1 international from the philanthropic community. We are joined here by Paul Bernstein, the CEO of Prizmah, the umbrella organization for Jewish day schools in North America, Rabbi David Rosenn, who's the executive director of Hebrew Free Loan in New York, Sagi Balasha, CEO of Ogen, which is the Israel Free Loan Fund, and my dear colleague Lisa Eisen, who's co-president of the Charles and Lynn Schusterman Family Foundation from DC. And thanks, Tamar, again for your work in putting this together. So just one logistic thing. There is a Q&A button somewhere on your screen. If you want to ask a question during the presentations, please use that function, and we're gonna try to convey those questions to the panelists as we go. So without further ado, I want to ask Paul to give us a short overview of what the school system, the Jewish school system in North America, is doing. I'm biased here. I have a child in that school system that is now learning from home. But Paul, what can you share with us about what Prizmah is doing, what individual schools are doing, and how the day school community is responding?
Andrés, thank you, and a special thanks to your team. I mean, like every organization, you've been going through a lot in the last few weeks, and at the same time that you had to postpone and move to a virtual environment for your conference. We're very grateful to you for making these kind of conversations possible, and thanks to your team as a whole. And I would say to everyone, we're all dealing with a variety of different personal and professional pressures in the face of this crisis. So it is really wonderful to be able to be together with a group like this. my fellow speakers and everyone who's participating. My name is Paul Bernstein. I'm the CEO of Prizmah, which is the Center for Jewish Day Schools. For those not familiar, I'll just give you the sort of the one line who we are. Prizmah is the network for Jewish day schools across North America. We exist to support the schools in terms of how they develop their talent, how they acquire the resources to be able to be successful, and how they undertake educational innovation. But really at our core, we place a lot in terms of how we build network and how we build particularly peer-to-peer learning relationships. And that's so valuable and vital as we're facing the current crisis. We were pretty early into this crisis. It's amazing to think it was only 15 days ago when the first 3 schools in New York and Westchester were forced to close. That was very central to us as an organization from day one. Even though Prizmah actually operates as a virtual organization, so many of our people are dispersed all over the country, we do have 5 members of our New York staff who are parents or siblings of SAR students. I happen to live inside the New Rochelle containment zone. So we've really had this personally and professionally in our minds from day one. And we moved the network very quickly to be able to do what we're here to do, which is to support the schools and leverage the power of the day school network, which is more than 200 schools that we work with. To give you a snapshot of what the schools have been doing and what we've been doing, of course, the vast majority of the schools in our network have now transitioned from in-person teaching and learning to virtual, and it's incredible to see how the faculty and staff of each school, as well as how the students are adapting. And I'm sure many people, if not most people on this call, are seeing that. If you have school-age children or college-age children, you're seeing that happen very rapidly, and credit to everyone for how they're adapting. But there is an enormous amount to do and to learn as we go forward. So up until now, in the first days, we took on curating and disseminating critical information for the field. That started with at the point where it was hard to know what was being said officially. What is the CDC and what are the Canadian health authorities actually saying, and how can schools learn about the basics of what this virus meant? From there, schools moved very rapidly into how do they communicate with their stakeholders. So we facilitated the sharing of letters and other communications between the schools. And then the conversations really grew around how to move to virtual teaching and learning. One of our core resources that we created 2 weeks ago was a resource page that we're happy both to provide, resources that we can curate from other sources. We've had over 2,400 unique visitors to that page, and we've been very happy to share that with other organizations around the community who are linking to it, and we're linking to them as well. The sharing of information between schools, and particularly between school leaders, is very crucial. And we have on our online network groups dozens of messages being shared and questions asked every day from leader to leader, as well as just their simple ability to do something that is absolutely critical right now, which is to be able to offer mutual support. I think we underestimated our peril, the social and emotional burdens that people are facing personally and professionally. And for us, it's really important that educators are able to work together and that we can help facilitate it, and that we also are then helping with the sharing of ideas in a lot of forms, including obviously webinars, many webinars like this. We had over 150 people, I think it was Monday of last week. So it was when the first school, which was the SAR school in Riverdale, New York, had moved to virtual, and they were on, I think, about day 3. They were willing to come onto a webinar and share with those 150 people what they were learning about virtual teaching and learning, which has been tremendously useful to others. And since that webinar, we've had 700 people go back to where we've shared that resource on our website and more than 100 people rewatched that webinar afterwards. So that sort of access to learning and experience from people who are just a few days ahead and who are trying different things to really create the best educational environment for students is really crucial. As we're developing, we're putting a lot more emphasis into targeted conversations, for example, among technology professionals or heads of schools. We're doing a lot of work with other partners and very happy that we can work with JFNA, with JFN, with the Jewish Education Project, with federations. We're developing a partnership with the Hebrew Free Loan Society, and David, I'm sure, will talk about the amazing things that they've already been doing, and we want to make that accessible to the day school community as best we can. We've been negotiating discounts with online education providers, some of whom are also moving to free, thank goodness, during the time of crisis. But then when we look ahead to what we think is coming, I would say there are 4 things. One is how we refine virtual teaching and learning, because this is new to everybody in the way that we are facing it. Second, as I mentioned, is how we make sure that the social, emotional, and mental health for students, for families, for teachers, frankly, are really at the front of our minds, and that we're supporting our staff in our organizations as well. The third is the really big one that is, we're only just beginning to see the signs of, and that is the financial challenges that individuals will face and families will face, and then that will seriously affect schools to a point where we think there could be existential challenges for a number of schools, which is everything from people who can't pay the remainder of their tuition this year to people who are struggling with the idea of how do I make a commitment to pay my kids' tuition into next year, and therefore we start to see, well, how do I afford what's there, and therefore greater call on the enormous tuition assistance that many schools already provide, through to potential threats to staffing, the fact that fundraising, of course, given the challenges that donors face as well right now, that fundraising is difficult. So we're seeing a lot of challenges for the schools. We're seeing the need for us all to start to adjust to the longevity of this crisis, something that we were all saying maybe maybe we'll be back at school in a couple of weeks. Realistically, we're not getting back before Pesach, and if we get back this school year, for some, it might appear to be, I might be optimistic. So this is a long crisis we're facing. The financial impact on schools and on communities, we think, is going to play out at least over the next 18 months and probably have much longer consequences. So if you are thinking, as someone who is philanthropic and has been connected with your day schools or wants to be connected with your day schools, what does this mean for me? I would just say stand by the school that you are closest to and be there for them and recognize the hard work they're doing. Know that even small gestures count. I had someone shared yesterday on one of our groups that their board was sending out small gift cards to all their teachers just to say thank you to the teachers. It's just tens of dollars, but actually can mean a lot to people when they receive it. And then as we look at what the growing financial threats are over the longer term, I think as a community, we're going to have, this is something that of course affects schools, but affects many institutions, and is where I expect this conversation will go, as to how we really support our institutions to survive and to be able to provide for the families that they wish to serve, in our case, the day schools in the years to come.
Paul, just one small follow-up question. I mean, I think that the fact that Prizmah had a network in place before the crisis was very helpful. So I'm wondering if there's anything that you can share very briefly of how an umbrella organization like Prizmah can be leveraged in a time of crisis like this one.
Yeah, I mean, we're more than happy to share with anyone what it is that we experience in terms of how networks work. So it's a combination of what we've over the years called listservs, getting a little bit more sophisticated, where people can really share questions, then how you capture what's shared in very simple ways. Thank goodness we have the technologies through websites, Facebook and other things. And then the how to curate conversations among like people in similar situations is something that we are constantly work on. So I would be more than happy to share it. The one other thing I was going to mention is I'm a big follower of Professor Nicholas Christakis Yale, who's an expert, who's a physician and a social scientist and done a lot of work on networks, and of course deals with the paradox we now face, which is if you want to avoid disease, you want to be on the edge of a network. If you want to cure the problems that we face in society, you actually want to be very central in a network and very highly connected. So we're now connecting in different ways, but actually what Christakis sort of says, it's our innate goodness in the form of cooperation and teaching that will allow us to repel the invader. And I believe that very strongly, and is something we should all be connecting with the people around us virtually and sharing everything that we can possibly share that might help someone else.
Thank you, Paul. And I will tell my son that smart people are thinking about how to make his distance learning experience better. Rabbi Rosenn, you are in a hot seat now. You're running a 100-year-old organization, if I'm not mistaken, a venerable institutional Jewish community that now in this crisis can play a significant role. Do you want to share with us what are you guys doing? How are you facing the crisis? What are the new things that you're coming up with?
Happy to do that, and thank you for moving so fast. I think one of the challenges right now is that we all have to move both fast and we have to be thoughtful, and those two things aren't always, they don't always come together. And so I recognize that sometimes we're going to have to be faster and maybe not see around the corner, and sometimes we're going to wait until we understand more of what the situation is. I'll give you an example about the speed at which our understanding of what the needs are is evolving. Very early in this pandemic, we were talking about how to respond. I had a board member who was under quarantine in New Rochelle, so I was getting up to the minute information about how that was affecting him and his community. And he said, we really should be reaching out to people because the financial impact of the quarantine is pretty significant. So we began to develop something targeted to New Rochelle, and then just realized this is, very soon going to be more widely needed. So at the beginning of last week, on Monday, we launched a program for interest-free loans, dropped our two guarantor requirement, which is standard for us, to one guarantor to try to make it easier for people to access. And we've been rolling out to all of our networks, to the UJA Federation of New York Agency Network, to the CUNY Hillels Network, to the very many community-based organizations who we partner with who serve low and moderate income people in New York City. We cover New York City, Long Island, and Westchester County. So those 8 counties have millions and millions of people, millions and millions of lower and moderate income households who were already in under some financial pressure, and now are really in an intense crisis. So we thought that the thing to do was, let's just make sure that people have easy access to affordable, non-predatory credit where they can have a cushion for themselves. And then we started getting phone calls. And the phone calls that we got first were from our small business borrowers. We have about 130 small business owners who we have loans out to currently, and they were calling to say, we are not going to be able to repay you on the schedule that we agreed to. We need some relief. Can you work with us? And so we began to negotiate with them about reduced repayments, and in some cases just pausing their repayment. It became very clear to us that the most impact that we will have is not necessarily on the people who we make loans to in the coming months, but it's on putting cash immediately in the pockets of the people who already hold our loans by allowing them to pause their repayments for a month or 2 months or whatever it turns out that we need. That, of course, completely decimates our ability to make new loans because we receive about $750,000 of repayments every month, and we recycle that immediately into new loans. So if that money is not coming in, if we decide to give people a 3-month hiatus, which is what we are hoping to be able to do, we won't be able to make a single new loan, which is not at all the situation that we want to be in. And so we have been reaching out to funders to talk about the idea of being able to both meet the needs of our current borrowers and also anticipate a pretty large spike in new applications for the loan program that we've designed for people who are feeling the financial impact of the coronavirus. Obviously, the federal government and city governments are now getting into the act as well, and so we will do our best to fill the gaps that are emerging. So, for instance, New York City is offering small businesses interest-free loans of up to $75,000. That's an incredible offer from the city of New York. Unfortunately, that program is not up and running yet. We've asked all of our borrowers to go and apply, and they're telling us that they can fill out a form, but they're not really getting any information back about when a decision will be made, at what level a decision will be made. So we're hoping to move a little bit faster and to complement what is being done by government, and that's the I think the virtue of the nonprofit sector is that we are able to be very close to the ground and understand where the needs are and fill in. Paul mentioned that we are speaking with Prizmah about a partnership. Normally, our loans are targeted to low and moderate income borrowers, but we understand that there are a lot of people in the middle income category where their kids are not on scholarship at schools, but they're not wealthy enough to not have to worry about their tuition. And right now they're being squeezed enormously. So we're trying to work out an arrangement where we can get targeted funding that we can lend to people who are in that situation. Because as Paul said, it's not just a matter of making sure that their kids are able to stay in school, but it's also a matter of the financial stability of the schools which they attend. So we're going to wind up, I think, doing many things above and beyond our normal lending practices, including the UJA Federation of New York has asked us to administer a rather large cash bridge loan fund to network agencies who have government contracts and their employees are supposed to be paid by these government contracts, but the government is not paying on time, which it didn't do before this crisis, and it's certainly going to have a harder time doing during the crisis. So we'll be trying to support some institutions as well as our individual borrowers.
David, if I may interrupt, just a question here. What is today the scope of loans that HFLS has out there, and what do you project that it would need to be expanded to in the future?
Sure. This year we were on track to make about $20 million worth of loans.
That's how many individual loans?
No, that's the dollar amount of.
No, I understand, but how many loans that represents?
We have probably about 2,400 loans in our portfolio. Mm-hmm. We anticipate that there's going to be a spike in demand for new loans, but as I was explaining at the beginning, we really are already invested in our current borrowers, and we want to make sure that they have the financial wherewithal to make it through, and also at the end of the day, eventually to pay back their loans to us. And if that requires us giving them some breathing room, we want to be able to do that. So I think there's a paradoxical situation that every nonprofit is facing. At exactly the moment when there is a contraction of resources, there's an expansion of demand.
Correct. And is there any early indication of what the nature of the loans are going to be that people are requiring these days? Is it bridge loans? Is it what type of support folks need help with?
I will say that the most immediate calls that we got were from small business owners. Right. These are people who have significant cash flow needs and their businesses are shut down. So trying to make sure that the small businesses have a plan to make it through the next few months and don't have to shut down, fire their employees. There's a whole ripple effect when a business closes that is different than a consumer loan. But on the individual level, we have a lot of people who are wage earners who are no longer earning a wage. We have people who are gig economy or freelancers who don't really have an institution behind them or a salary that they earn. They're really dependent upon hourly work. And so we're anticipating a lot of loans to those people. I had a conversation recently with the head of the Broadway League. Broadway is dark in New York, and there are thousands of people who work on Broadway, not just the actors, but all the stagehands, the orchestras, the ushers, everybody. So one of the things that we'll be doing is working through channels to try to get the word out to specific groups of people. I also had a round of emails with the CUNY campus Hillel directors. The students they know if they had work-study jobs, they no longer have those work-study jobs. If they had jobs off of campus, they no longer probably have those jobs either. A lot of uncertainty around what's going on with students, and we want people to be able to stay in their degree programs. So we are trying to work it out with them, how to make that possible. And there are many, many challenges. Financial challenges are, it's one kind of challenge, but it's a fairly simple challenge to address if you have the resources there.
Thank you, Rabbi Rosenn. This is very informative and worrisome on the other hand, but glad that the community is stepping up and you guys are stepping up. Now to another loan organization across the ocean, Sagi Balasha, the CEO of Ogen, the Israel Free Loan Fund, and a partner of JFN in other endeavors. In Israel, the situation is problematic because nonprofits have a double whammy. Many of them were not receiving government payments because there's no government. There hasn't been a government for more than a year, and there's no budget. So, and on top of that, now we have this crisis. So, tell me, what is Ogen doing or what plans to do to support nonprofits in this crisis? You're muted, Sagi, so you have to unmute yourself.
So hi everybody from Jerusalem. We're almost under curfew here, and every day the closure is getting tighter and more dramatic. And under those circumstances, many people are losing their job. Today I read that every hour there are 5,000 Israelis losing their job or being sent to unpaid vacations. So Ogen is taking care of 3 layers in the society: private people, small businesses, and nonprofits. As you said, nonprofits has been suffering for a long time. For a year, there is no government in Israel. And even before the corona, because the lack of government, the payment that the nonprofit get from the government, which is 48% of non-profits' income come from the government, had suffered a lot of delays, and sometimes they don't get it. Banks and any financial institutions in Israel, I guess it's quite the same everywhere, don't tend to give loans to non-profits. Tens of thousands of non-profits have no access to credit whatsoever in any means. And their only solution is coming back to their donors to give them donations, and and give donation maybe before the time because the government doesn't give them. It caused a lot of damage in all the activity of those nonprofits, and there is no solution. Now the corona came and the situation became even worse. So Ogen decided to allocate 30 million shekels, which is like almost $8 million, to help nonprofits with loans. The problem is that those loans are very risky, and especially now, we don't know what will happen, and we need help here. So we started to develop a risk mitigation cushion of 6 million shekels, 20% of the amount, in a way that next to the 30 million shekels we allocate, there will be 6 million shekels, 20% of this amount that will help us mitigate the risk and the potential default. Luckily, we already raised half of this money, 3 million shekels, and also raised from one insurance company of Israel some money to decrease interest rates and to really help. We are very close to being able to offer this to hundreds of nonprofits. We still have 3 million shekels or $1 million approximately to go in order to implement that. This is regarding nonprofits. We have all the abilities here to underwrite nonprofits. We know how to do that. We know how to access them. They're all waiting. We're working with the umbrella organization of the nonprofits in Israel to maybe convince the government of Israel to help with this risk cushion. And we hope to be successful in a few days. Else than that, we've developed a fast track for small businesses. Many small businesses in Israel lost any ability to operate. And they don't have any back. They don't have any insurance that covers them, and they don't have unemployment. Very problematic situation. We are giving them a type of bridge loans in a really fast track that can apply. 7 business days, we do the underwriting. They don't have even to submit a business plan. We're checking that their viability and ability to survive, and we're giving them a loan of up to 100,000 shekels. The other track is for low-income people, middle and low-income people that are suffering from the situation, the hundreds of thousands of Israelis that were left without a job now. And we're giving them, a bridge loans just to deal with those hard months. Those are free loans, no interest, up to 30,000 shekels. And it's not, it doesn't solve the solution for the long term, but if the problem will be a 3-4 month problem, that can be a solution. If we're looking at 8 months or 1 year, I'm not sure.
Sagi, one of the questions that I'm confronting here from JFN is, can American funders, philanthropists, make loans legally to Israeli NGOs?
The answer is yes.
Within a PRI or within how does it work?
There are a few options to do that. We are a vehicle, the 30 million shekels that we allocated to help nonprofits, they all come from impact investors, people that are depositing their money with us because they know we are a lending vehicle. We are a nonprofit lending vehicle to help nonprofits and small businesses, and they're putting their money with us to lend to others. And in the end of the term, we are giving them back the money. It's much better than donation. And the PRI, the United States, has an amazing tax code, program-related investment, PRI, that allows foundations to give an impact investment that will be considered for tax reasons like a donation, meaning it can be part of the 5% any foundation gives annually.
I understand.
Although
ideally,
although
ideally we would want funders not to take these other 5%, but to take these out of their corpus because they don't want to cannibalize grants that they're already giving.
That's ideal, of course.
Yeah,
that's of course ideal, but any foundation can decide. So that can be an easy vehicle. We have a few American foundations already that are, those 30 million that we give nonprofits and an extra 30 million that we have for small businesses all come from foundations, as and American foundations. That some of them did a PRI and some of them, just gave the money, and it can be done easily.
Yeah. For those of you in the call not familiar with those terms, PRI, program-related investments, and impact investing and stuff like that, please don't hesitate to ask us later on, and we can send questions back to Sagi and to David because I think that they are experts in this field. Thank you, Sagi, and hope everybody's staying safe there in Israel. And now to Lisa Eisen with the Schusterman Foundation. Lisa sent out a beautiful letter to the community together with other foundation colleagues, in which she outlines some of the response that she and others in the philanthropic community are doing, how they're taking leadership, and how they're stepping up in this moment of crisis. So, Lisa, if you want to share with us what you are seeing in your own foundation, but also as a response of the broader philanthropic community, and what are your thoughts going forwards of what funders should do, what we at JFN should do to help, and what everybody should be looking at.
Thanks, Andrés, and thanks for pulling this call together, and to the panelists for the just vital work that you're doing right now. It's so important, and I will say that we're very proud to have made a grant to support the work of the Hebrew Free Loan Society this week. And David, thank you for everything you're doing in New York. So look, I mean, this is obviously just unprecedented, uncertain time for all of us, and everyone's in uncharted waters. So we're just facing serious short-term risks, as we've heard, but also we're thinking about, as funders, like, how do we help support the long-term viability of the institutions and the systems that support Jewish life in the United States and around the world. And I want to reiterate what you said at the beginning, Andrés, which is, while everyone is personally and professionally affected by the crisis, as funders, we are in a privileged position, and we have great responsibility to step up right now. Like, we cannot be doing business as usual. We cannot be sitting on the sidelines. We have to deploy, I believe, the resources that we have to help individuals and institutions meet the most acute needs, while at the same time thinking about resilience and viability and sustainability in the medium and the long term. So I'm very mindful of the need for funders to shoulder the responsibility that we have to our grantees and to the broader Jewish people, so we can ensure a strong future for us. And that's why a couple of us got together to begin talking about what could we do quickly and differently to help alleviate some of the burdens on our grantees as they navigate this crisis. And in coordination with Barry Feinstone at Jim Joseph and Mark Jerendoff at Maimonides, we drafted this open letter to our grantees to ensure them that we're in this together with them and we have their backs. And the message that we were trying to send is, this is not business as usual. It cannot be business as usual. And we have to adjust our expectations. We have to adjust our funding and our policies to help our grantees and our community weather this storm. I don't know if everyone has seen the open letter that we shared, but I'll just give the key things that we as funders committed to doing. One is we would maintain our funding levels even when the events and the trips and the gatherings would not be taking place, and allow grantees to repurpose the funds. Two, we would adjust our expectations about grant benchmarks and outcomes. Three, we would give you as much time as you need to deal with the crisis by not expecting reporting requirements, site visits, and other kinds of obligations. And I will say on that count, we have already told all of our grantees who had payments coming in the next 6 months, we're just releasing the payments. Do not send us any reports. You don't need to do anything. We are going to try to act as quickly as we can to support you and consider lots of different financial and non-financial ways that we can help. And we will do our best to ease the burden of communication on you by trying to coordinate. You have grantees have multiple funders. We don't want you to have to be talking to everyone individually. We will rearrange our schedules to jump on calls together. So we're really just trying to do, in the very immediate, honestly, what I believe is the least we can do to help funders who are organizations that are just navigating day-to-day crises. I want to echo what David said about fast and thoughtful. We wanted to move really, really quickly as the crisis was escalating to send these messages of reassurance and support. And therefore, we just approached a limited number of colleagues. We made a quick judgment call. We got 20 of the largest foundations in Jewish life signed on in the first 24 hours. And we are hoping that our intention was that if we put the message out, other funders would be inspired to adopt these same kind of policies with their grantees. So, as my colleagues at the Ford Foundation have said, we've just got to give as much flexibility, as much certainty, and as much stability as we possibly can to our grantees at this moment. And I just want to share a couple of other ideas of things that funders can do beyond that list that I just said. Some of the things that we are all brainstorming about and thinking about, and I hope we'll be able to put into action quickly. Most important, and this is Kathy Rich from the Ford Foundation, I will credit her, the most important thing I think funders can do is repurpose restricted grants into general operating grants to give grantees the flexibility to navigate in crisis. There's also potentially emergency funding, of course, the loans, interest-free loans, maintaining gay lists and conference sponsorships. Just leave the sponsorship money. If you can, leave the registration money, even though the event's not happening. We're thinking of technical support, such as providing financial and technology assistance, legal assistance for helping renegotiate contracts, and certainly not expecting reporting and media metrics and that kind of thing. So those are just a couple of payroll backstopping is another thing that we've been brainstorming about. So there's a lot of ideas on the table. We want to hear from our grantees. I will say that the response to the letter was really, in most part, overwhelmingly positive and grateful. I think there's just so much stress that especially CEOs who are trying to guide their organizations through this crisis are feeling. And I think this added some sense of relief that they were not in it alone. And that leads to, I think, another piece of advice I'd like to give to funders right now, which is just communicate and over-communicate with your grantees. I highly recommend. We've been staying in very close touch with most of our grantees about how they're doing, what are their short-term needs, what ideas do they have to be helpful, that we can be helpful, triaging the most urgent human needs. And you can't do this unless you're listening to the people who are on the ground with the constituents, with the people who are most in need. And I will say, sadly, that most of the people we called said they hadn't heard from anybody else. So please call the people that you work with in your grantee organizations and let them know that you care and that you're in this with them. And then I also just want to urge all the funders who are on this call that we have to change how we do business as a community. I really believe that the kind of things that we see funders stepping up to do right now in greater partnership with grantees, I hope, is how we should be always doing business. We need to be in more of a mutual sense of partnership and interdependence between the philanthropic community and the nonprofit community so that we learn together, we meet the greatest needs, and we work in a much more holistic way. We cannot be successful without each other, and we've got to just be more trusting, more transparent in order to accelerate our ability to meet our goals and serve our constituents. And that's not something that just should happen in a crisis. That really needs to be, I think, our MO as a funding community. And I'm a firm believer, I'm speaking for myself and not for other funders who signed on necessarily, but that the best way to help organizations move forward is with flexible multi-year general operating support. That can't always be how you fund, but I think that is what gives organizations the capacity and the agility to weather crises like these and to achieve their strategic goals. I think less reporting is probably a good thing, less burdened on grantees. It's a good thing all the time, not just now. And certainly listening to our grantees and their constituents and letting their needs inform how we function. And of course, the greater funder coordination that's happening more now, I think that really should be much more of how we operate. And I think, to your point, Andrés, JFN has an important role to play in providing a platform for funder learning and communication and coordination in times of crisis and always. So I'm just hoping we'll work together in new and creative ways as the philanthropic community, and together with the organizations and leaders that we are in this crisis with, and hopefully after the crisis, because our interdependence is really the source of our strength.
Thank you, Lisa. This is very enlightening, and this is issues that you and I discussed before the crisis. And by the way, if you haven't, you can listen to the podcast that Lisa and I did together on What Gives, the JFN podcast. And we talked, and it's interesting because we do talk about many of these things. We talk about undesignated funding. We talk about giving nonprofits capacity, and those are good funding principles that maybe the crisis can be a catalyst for them. So I was thinking, as I was listening to you, I was thinking along those lines, every crisis is also a catalyst for good things. Wars are catalysts for the development of antibiotics and, better medicine and better technology. So maybe what do you think are, and this is for all the panelists, what do you think is the things that we should be looking at, that this, thinking of the day after? What are things out there that we should be using the opportunity to develop more? I mean, Paul, is it more virtual learning to lower cost of schools? Is it a more robust lending platform? Is it a different funding philosophy? So who wants to take it first?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
It's a great question, and yes, I was at a National Association of Independent Schools conference just before APAC, so before really all of this really hit us, and in a session on sort of futurology about education, one of the speakers, just as an aside, said, "Who knows what the world of education is going to look like after our kids have spent however long they're going to spend learning from home," anticipating what was coming. So yes, there will be innovation. I don't think we will ever substitute for face-to-face interaction, whether in education or in the workplace. And it's really crucial that we don't lose sight of the brilliance of what existed before. But yes, we'll have new models and new ways of doing business. And I also think that part of the relevance, as you and Lisa were saying, of the way you've been thinking for and others have been thinking for a long time to the crisis, is really how do we come out of this creating strength and sustainability for, I like the way you said it, Lisa, it's the long-term viability of the systems that support Jewish life. That's the challenge in front of us now, whether it's schools or synagogues or JCCs or camps or in individual life. Those principles that you often talk about as philanthropists that can be hard for people to adopt, if we're forced into it, maybe we can then make that our norm.
Yeah, Paul, I agree very much. And I want to add also, there will be creativity and there will be innovation. But one of the things that comes forward at a moment of crisis is the quality of the relationships that we've all built together already. I've known Lisa for 20 years or so, and the fact that they were able to move so fast, I think, is partly a function of trust and building relationships over time. The Jewish Funders Network and every other network that is out there, they prove their value when we can move fast together because we know each other. And I just want to say that as we move through this, let's recognize how valuable those relationships are. And I hope it's soon that we get back to normal, and that one of the things that we will invest resources in and think of as a communal asset is time spent networking with each other so that we can have these relationships in place. When moments of crisis arise, we'll be able to move much faster and much smarter as a community.
Lisa, you wanted to chime in?
I did. They say you can only move as fast as the speed of trust. And so I think David's point is right, and it goes to our broader point that I'd like to make is I think we need to use this time of crisis to do business differently and to have a much more common and shared approach. I'm thinking about Vuli and Unicorns Unite, and it's like all the change makers, all the people who want to support Jewish life and make it as vibrant and thriving as it can be. We're all in this together. It shouldn't be the funders and the nonprofits. We should all be working as one common vision. And I think a much more shared approach, a much more trusting and relationship based approach in which we listen to each other. We understand what the most crucial needs are. We don't all just go and make Shabbos for ourselves, but we think about, how can we move our community together forward based on more common ways of doing business, on more coordination, on, it is the trust that's beyond giving leaders that we believe in and organizations who we like their mission, the trust to invest in them with general operating support and covering their costs so they can weather things like this. I think there's definitely a time and place for restricted funding. We do it for sure. But it does take a trusting and open and transparent relationship to give these kind of general operating grants and to listen to what the grantees need and let them pivot as they say they need to pivot. And I think that's more the kind of approach that I would like to see us take moving forward to really have a much more critical impact.
Lisa, do you think, are there any, Sagi, just 1 second. Do you see any conversations in the funding community about if there's a need moving beyond the 5% payout?
Look, I think this is super early, and I mean, I will say there are some foundations that have seen their portfolios drop, right? And there are others who, are talking about what more can we do right now. And so I think it's a little too early for me to comment on that. What I can say is that foundations are talking, and there are people raising their hands saying, let me know how I can help. Let me know if you're going to be working in a coordinated way. Let me know if there's going to be emergency funds. Like, we want to be helpful now, and we're trying. And I do know that foundations have given the kind of message that we put out publicly to their grantees. And I'm hoping that people will step up. I mean, I know that we are going to, as I can only speak for Schusterman. But I know that colleagues that I'm talking to regularly are thinking about how they can step up now as well and do things differently and creatively. And some of that's going to be financial, and some of it's going to be loans, and some of it's going to be technical assistance. But we do want to hear from our grantees and from the community about how we can be most helpful.
Thank you. Sagi, you wanted to add something to that?
The philanthropic world was always limited in resources, but in this new era is especially limited in resources. Many foundations have shrunk in the last 2 weeks, and it will take a long time before we go back to the situation we had on January 1st. And I think this is the time also to examine new and more financially sophisticated ways to work together, how we can leverage philanthropic money. How can we use philanthropic money to engage corporate money? How can we recycle money? All that, I think it has been 2-3 years, this conversation about impact investment, but I think there was a lot of talking. I think now it's time to dive deep into those issues and see how we can do more with the less we currently have.
Great. There is a question here. I'm reading to you guys the questions that are coming in. There's one about, for David, whether there are discussions in the city about freezing rent for small businesses and if that can help. And in fact, David answered on the chat that there are proposals under discussion and mortgage lenders are considering freezing payments. So probably it's possible that lenders we do likewise. Somebody is asking me to repeat the quote that Lisa said, which I took down, so I can do it. It says, "You can only move as fast as the speed of trust." Very, very well said. I have a question here that it's also worrying me a lot. What is happening with folks that are in situations of special needs, parents with, and especially maybe for you, Paul, but also to David, those parents with children, with autism, for example, will have very special problems in times of isolation. People that are particularly vulnerable because they have a disability. What are you guys seeing out there in terms of response to that particular population?
Well, I think that people who have special education needs, people with disabilities, are in general always challenged to have their needs met fully. Hebrew Free Loan, we have a loan program for lower income families who have kids with special education needs that are not able to be met by the public school system in New York City. New York City has a commitment to pay for private schooling for these children. And that program, so far as we know, is going to continue to proceed even as schools shut down and everything moves to online learning. I think the people who will be most challenged to recreate an educational setting in their home are definitely people who have kids who have special needs for their education. And it's not going to be possible, obviously, for all the trained educators and teachers to be with them in a way that is best for them. I do think that the Department of Education in the city of New York, like every other government agency, needs to make a decision about whether that money will continue to flow. Will there be any difference because maybe the last half of the school year has been canceled? I expect not, and I certainly hope that at least governments that are have funding commitments in place are not going to retrench on those funding commitments. But honestly, it is very early days in all of this, and it's really hard to tell.
Yeah, I was just going to emphasize exactly that. It's very early days. And I saw a note from one of the very thoughtful heads of school in Boston yesterday, and the Boston Day schools are literally starting their virtual teaching today. And what the message she was trying to send was that we're not asking people to homeschool. We still want to maintain the school support for all of our students, and therefore they are now trying to think through how do they actually do that for all students.
Okay, this is where actually have a lot more questions, but we want to respect people's time, and everybody has other virtual meetings to attend, I'm sure. I just wanted to thank you all, say that these are tough times, but one of the virtues of being a people with a 4,000-year history is that whatever history throws at us, we've been there before, and we're gonna go through this. We're gonna emerge on the other side stronger and better if we only understand that history will judge us by how we relate to one another and how empathetic and kind we are to those that are most affected. And so these could be very hard days, but this could be also our finest hour as a community. So thank you all. Remind you, next week we have a virtual meetup at JFN. You're gonna receive many emails reminding you, but this is the quality of the conversations we're gonna have. And also remember that this is the first of a series of webinars that we're going to do on the community response. The next one is going to be, as I said, next week. And then there is another one on March 30th. So stay tuned for that. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay kind. Bye, everybody.